Tuesday, August 15th, 2023, Town of Monroe Planning Board regular meeting. Noreen, would you please do the roll call attendance?
Bonnie Franson.
Here.
Nick Napoli.
Here.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
Dylan Penn.
Here.
Bob Garzak.
Here.
Bob will be sitting in for Pat Shea.
So we have a quorum, so we can conduct business. I'd like to point out the fire exits. There are 2 exits in front of me and to the audience's rear. There's an entrance exit out that way and then another out here to the outside. With that, would we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag. We're going to move around the agenda just slightly. I'd like the first project to come up because it's going to be relatively easy. BJ's site plan, if you'd come up. I know you're making a request with regard to changing a condition, and with that, Member Manson will recuse himself, as he has been for prior meetings. If you state your name for the record.
George Lithgow, J&G Law, for the attorney for the applicant.
And Pat Smith with RD Management. We're the owner of the shopping center.
So would you like to give an overview of what the request is for the planning board members?
Give you a very brief overview.
Okay.
We've spoken with O&R. O&R is continuing to work on the, basically we've gone through the title for this property, and O&R has concluded it has sufficient easements to protect its transmission lines. It does not need a further the title work that we're willing to agree with. Requires recording an additional easement.
Yeah, you're not coming through my, George. Sorry. I don't think it's close enough to your.
Okay. So basically, O&R doesn't have.
No?
Not working. Red button lit, or
The red button by the mouse speaking should be lit.
the one by the...
There you go.
How about that?
Yes.
Much better, thank you.
Technology.
Okay, very simple overview. O&R does not need nor want an additional easement. We are showing the easement area that they do want to protect on the plan. They're satisfied with that. And that's mainly because of all the title, there's, 20 some odd utility easements that may affect this property. They don't want to complicate it with another easement because they're satisfied they have what they need, and we're agreeing to treat the property that way. So the condition that they would like to modify is number 7, which currently asks for an approval letter from Orange and Rockland. Orange and Rockland does not typically approve work that's being done in their easement area. What they do is a conditional consent letter, which basically is a no objection letter, or as I shortened it recently in an email, a no letter. We have no objection.
So I'm going to let our attorney and our engineer comment on this before we comment on this, because there's some things that aren't clear to me. So, and one of the fundamental questions I have is whether in the end we are going to have to amend the site plan. You know, we had requested for a very long time that we get some kind of sign off from O&R, some letter, some email, et cetera. And so I'm going to let them go next, and then we can get into it. So I'm at this point really hesitant to change any of the conditions, but I'm going to let Ashley and Sean speak to their thoughts on this.
Sure. So I guess I misunderstood the letter. George, you explained that O&R will provide a letter that says they have no objection to the plan, and it will allow you to continue work as currently designed?
That's correct, yeah. What they issue is what's called a no objection letter.
And
And
you
that's
would-
going to be signed by us, by RD, BJ's, and by O&R. So you will get a letter. You're just, what we're asking for is that we would give it to you after we get the building permit, because we want to get started on it right now. But we will provide the no objection letter prior to opening the gas station.
So my concern is with timing. So there's a proposed sediment trap that should be installed as one of the first items prior to any site disturbance. If you don't have that letter prior to this sediment trap being constructed, then essentially the site plan has to change in order to accommodate that. You know, the project has a SWIP, the erosion sediment control plan was approved. Part of that erosion sediment control plan was the sediment trap installed within the easement area.
Do they have an NOI already filed?
They have an NOI filed.
Okay. George, did you want to respond to that?
Sediment, that's not any kind of physical construction, though, right? That's just the,
It's excavation and grading, yes.
okay.
So, Ashley, do you have any thoughts on this?
Originally, I had thought that perhaps you could frame it where you'd require, I don't know that it would really make much of a difference from the applicant's standpoint, but require that letter before starting any construction. And
Right.
because of this concern, that it would be any construction, at all, not just limited to any construction within the easement area, because that erosion control is needed before they really,
All right.
that moves that prior to commencing construction versus prior to building permit. I don't know what that really accomplishes.
We've agreed that we won't do any work in the easement area with O&R until this no objection letter is signed. The other reason we want to get the building permit is O&R is really not paying attention to this until they see a building permit. They're giving us some help and they're moving it along, but I'm never going to be able to get my pre-construction meeting scheduled with the engineers until the building permit is issued. So that's the other reason we want to have the building permit. But we're not going to do any work in the easement area. Again, you're talking about the sequencing. I thought we could do some of the work outside of the easement area, where BJ's could do some of the work as far as like doing the excavation for the tanks. But if you're saying that has to get done first,
Correct.
then it's going to have to get done first. But we still would like to move the condition back just so we can, once we're done, that no consent letter becomes the final thing. We don't need to come back to the planning board to do one more, one more stage with the planning board. It's, you'll still have all your protections. We won't do work in the easement area until we have it.
Yeah, so here's my concern. Actually, let me go. I'll start with the other board members. Dylan, any comments?
No.
Okay. Any comments? No. Comments?
Nice catch, Sean.
So it says prior to the issuance of a C of O, which means that you will have already started construction. You will have already done work. It says the applicant shall provide proof of O&R's no objection letter. But that seems very late in the process to get a letter that says no objection. To me, what we've been asking for all along is some kind of email, some kind of letter that indicates they're okay with the improvements that are proposed within their easement area, and we have yet to get that. And at this point, I personally am not supportive of not getting something from O&R. If you've had the opportunity to communicate with them, you've said something to the effect, therefore I request with O&R's consent. But we have nothing indicating that O&R does consent.
Well, you have a letter from me. I have spoken with the attorney. When I issued that letter, she consented to my doing that.
Right, but why don't we have a letter from them?
If you tried to get a letter from O&R, you would understand why. It's first off, O&R's counsel is Con Ed's counsel. That office is in New York City. It does a variety of things that are very extensive, and they're very concerned legitimately about making sure everything is properly done. There are multiple flagpoles, from my experience, that things go up, they come down, they change, they modify, they go back up the flagpole to make sure it's done correctly, and it does take time. But I would point out to you, we got a representation from O&R in November that they were working on the easement. When I eventually figured...
I'm sorry, George, did we get something in writing from O&R?
No, you have something from Pat which says he spoke and they said they were working on the easement.
Understood, but to date, we actually have nothing from O&R.
That's pretty much what we have.
Well, I appreciate that you have it, but we don't have it either, and we're the ones who have to sign off on the site plan.
Yeah, the only thing we have from O&R is just emails saying that they're going to work, first they were going to work on a new easement. So they move the goalposts in, they move the goalposts out. So now it's like, okay, we don't want an easement, so now we're going to start all over again, and now we'll go to work on this, the no objection letter, but we want to add language to the no objection letter, which is kind of sort of easement-y language, which is the language we sent over to Ashley, saying you're going to recognize the 135 feet, but it's not going to be recorded as an easement. So, but maybe the way to fix this thing, which would work for us, is saying, if you'll say prior to the start of construction, we'll provide the letter, and then but I can still get the building permit in the meantime, because the building permit is absolutely critical. They're going to keep moving this thing around, and their excuse is always going to be, well, what's the hurry? You don't have a building permit anyway.
Okay, so so I don't know if this can be done. I don't want really there being any activity until we have something from O&R. And what's going to have happened is I will have signed a site plan where we don't have anything indicating that they don't object, which is what we've been requesting for quite some time. So, I feel a little better if you would commit to you cannot do anything until we get something from O&R. But even then, and I understand your frustration, but ultimately we're making this approval, and it's on the basis of having nothing from O&R. And I understand, George, your representations and your letters, and you've had these communications. We have nothing at this point. So let me kind of direct it back to Sean and Ashley.
Just to finish on that point, I mean, based on what Sean said, the first thing we have to do is that sediment control, and that's in the easement area, so we can't do anything until we get that. So you have, to answer your question, more than willing to agree that we will not do anything out there until we get, and no commencement of construction until we get the letter, the no objection letter from O&R. But at least if I have the building permit, it's going to make
You could
getting
give
that.
it to O&R.
I can give that to O&R, and they can say, I've got a building permit. Now, come on, let's get serious now.
So a crazy scenario I'm going to float out here. What if the condition was changed that the building permit was issued, but a stop work order was simultaneously issued and lifted at such time that O&R provides a letter?
That's fine.
I remember last time you were in front of us, I asked you to investigate Orange and Rockland Project Center. Have you done that?
That website, and that is not you have to go through their council for what we're trying to accomplish. It's one thing that may make it different is this is a transmission line. Many of the easements in the area, most of the easements in the area are distribution easements, and those are more flexible. The transmission line is like the mother jewels, so they pay a lot of attention to it.
And I asked a question to Paul Leggett, who was our engineer. He said that's not the proper venue for this project. So the engineers agreed that that's typically the way you go, but it didn't work on this one. But since the last time we were here, we have made progress with O&R. It's just that we're not going to get it over the finish line until we can show them a building permit. But again, to Sean's point, if you want to issue a stop work order, it's going to be the same effect for us because we're not going to start anyway.
I think the other thing is Ben would have to be comfortable with that, because it's one thing for us to propose it, but for some reason, from an enforcement perspective, he may not want to do that. And again, you've had these communications, but we have no documentation, and or very little. We have documentation that you're trying to send things and communicate with them, but this is not something new. We've been asking for this for a long time.
I understand, and if I were in your position, I'd be asking the same questions. And what I'm saying is that we're going to get it, but I just need a little bit of help from the planning board to get me to push over the line with them, because I can tell you, we're going to be here a month from now asking the exact same thing, because they're just not going to, nothing's going to motivate them until they see an actual building permit that we're ready to start.
I mean, so just to back up, I did sign the site plan, but it's a matter of now, I guess, meeting the next condition then to get the building permit. So,
If it is.
I don't know, so, thoughts, Ashley? I mean, how we might change this or word this, or if any planning board members feel otherwise.
You walk me through what would be put in place to lift the stop work order if issued the same time as the permit
That
for this
the-
specific example.
So in order to lift the stop work order, the applicant would not have started construction. And if they had, they would have to bring the site back to basically the precondition of the site. And O&R's letter would have to be provided that they don't object to the plan as approved.
That's a contingent put on through Ashley based on that letter.
I believe that's what Ashley's drafting right now to float to you guys, if you would consider it. The only other consideration that Bonnie suggested was that it is Ben okay with issuing that stop work order simultaneously with the building permit, which, is a fair point.
We'll accept it whether or not he's issued it.
I mean, the condition doesn't change, it's just the timing of us providing, satisfying that condition. That's the only thing that's changing.
We're basically at the point where we've done everything short of you getting a building permit. But now you're saying you want the building permit, but you're willing not to do any construction.
That's correct.
There is a fair amount of time to do prep work. One of the things we do have to do is meet with O&R and go over the plan for construction equipment, go over the safety plan. There are things to do.
And that relies on having a building permit.
That relies in part upon having a building permit, because we need the contractor to be tasked with doing this.
And the engineers have told us that they don't want to have that meeting until the building permit's issued.
Because you do have a signed site plan at this point.
That's correct.
So why can't they be satisfied with that?
They want a building permit. They're operating on, it's okay, building permit means something's going to get built. A signed site plan to them doesn't have the same weight that it has in this room. And we obviously, it's critically important for us and critically important for the board, not so much for them.
So if we're not going to allow you to proceed with any disturbances,
That's correct.
then what are you going to do? Are you going to do material storage? Are you going to do anything on the site? You're essentially doing nothing other than pulling a building permit.
I don't think we can do anything. I mean, maybe we could put a trailer out there, but that would be about it. We can't do any work until the sediment control is in place, right?
That's correct.
And that's in the easement area. So to answer your question, we probably wouldn't even bother putting a trailer out there at that point, because that's just, sediment control doesn't even require a trailer. So to answer your question, we will not do any work until the no objection letter is issued.
It makes sense to me.
But so a stop work order, though, isn't that essentially a violation?
Well, typically it would be, yeah, if they actually then started work after, so
We're like
I'm not
placing
sure if
something
they'd
on
be
them that
able
might
to
not be the
do
right.
some kind of condition, in the building permit saying prior to any disturbance, this letter has to be submitted. But I don't know that.
I guess my question is, can we even impose these kind of conditions on a building permit that we don't control?
That's another thing, that it's
Because it's really,
up to the building inspector.
right.
And I don't want to put him on the spot now
You could put the condition in that we can't do work until no objection letter is issued, right? Wouldn't that have the same weight as a stop work order?
As a condition.
We'd be
It would be a
we'd be
condition,
violating
yeah.
the condition. If we started work, we'd violate the condition, and then I think I'd rather try my luck with Ben than with the planning board.
Now you're getting nothing.
Just gonna say, you shouldn't have
By
said
which he
that.
means, he doesn't want to have to come back and burden you with another appearance.
Oh, thank you. That sounds so much more
Explain why I started work in
palatable.
violation of the condition. So we have no intention of violating that condition. However you want to word it or whatever restrictions you want to put on it, it's fine by us because we're not going to start work until that no objection letter is issued.
I see the only way that we could do it is to make it a condition of the site plan approval. I don't see, oh, go
I
ahead.
just asked Ben if I could give him a call, so.
Okay. Sorry, this ended up being longer than I thought it would be. So while you're doing that, George, my monitor's not working suddenly. George, you jinxed it.
Available. Next applicant up?
How's that? We're going to defer that for now, and let's go back to Summercrest LLC. And while we're waiting for the applicant to come back up, did Orange County get us a letter? The planning department, did they send us, we were, huh?
Summercrest
Yes.
just went out. Ashley and I discussed it yesterday.
Oh, so it hasn't gone out yet?
No, I have it all together. It has to go out. I have to reduce the file size. It kicked it back from her.
Okay,
So I have to look at it in the morning. I got it back this afternoon before I came up.
okay, all right. So I think we had talked to you previously about, this has to go to Orange County Planning
At
Department?
239?
Yeah, and that hasn't gone out, so we're
I
still.
called them today to find out, and they said they didn't receive anything
Okay.
as of yet.
All right, so, why don't you state your name for the record, and let's discuss what we've received to date.
I'm Jonathan DeJoy. I'm the attorney for the applicant. And
Timothy Mitz, the property manager, and Miss Lee is in the back there. If we need her for anything.
so at the last meeting, we kind of discussed what we were looking for and an overview of the plans. Subsequently, I submitted a letter that clarified some of the points in Sean's letter, and then Ashley and I kind of emailed back and forth on some further clarifications that were needed.
So, since Sean is out, Ashley, any comments or things that we need to address as a planning board? I think there are two improvement tables, or not really two improvement tables. There is a determination that was made by our building inspector in terms of the uses compared to another table, I think that your office prepared, that talks about the individual buildings and what they are.
So we did submit two different tables.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything from the building inspector, and we may just not have gotten that, but I'm not aware of any table that he put together.
The applicant did submit a table of proposed improvements and table of proposed improvements, and I think a schedule of,
Yeah,
The other
one
one was
was
called a
more of
schedule.
a general overview that explained what the buildings were, and the other one kind of got into a little more detail about the specific improvements, like the type of siding.
If you just make sure you're looking, if you could scroll to the bottom and just make sure that's the
Latest.
latest one, which was,
At the top, actually,
top, sorry.
last revised August 10th. So that's
It's an older?
that's an older version.
forward it to you.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest thing. Today's email?
That one of the 3 attachments today, Noreen?
It says yesterday on mine.
Oh, maybe it was yesterday.
I just sent it.
What we're working off of from that?
That, and then there's also a schedule, which I believe was in, I'll give you the date of that. It was,
Summer Crest. August, not July. First submission. Table of improvement, August.
I think it would be the second or third.
I can't get in.
Just, sorry.
Sorry about that. Wow, you need a microphone to hear me? Don't tell her.
Unfortunately, I can hear you, but not when I go to do the minutes. I
Gotcha.
can't. I don't catch
Yeah,
everything.
so you have the table of improvements, which was a second version given to you, and then I was follow up with a question of the exterior permit application only. The board had asked me to detail what kind of siding and what color those particular buildings were that were subject to your COA.
emailed you the second document. Yes, but it
Yeah.
was revised, I believe.
Looks like this right here, just for reference.
I just, also says July 26th.
Yeah, there wasn't a revision date on it, I don't think.
No, there wasn't. On that one, there wasn't a revision date.
All right, so this is the.
Yes, that was submitted on August 8th. I think it was just one of the buildings had the wrong type of, if I recall correctly.
So, Sean, do you want to go through your comments?
All right, I don't have much. Apparently, I must have missed that PDF that was just shared with the colors. But pursuant to our last comments, the applicant provided the survey which identified each of the buildings numbered. as well as the chart that was put together that was really useful, that just explained each building and what the proposed work that was going to be done. I had missed that, like I said, I missed that table that identified each of the colors, which again is helpful for the board because you're going to be issuing the certificate of appropriateness, not only for the type of materials, but the color of the materials on each of the buildings. The one thing that, I apologize if you've already discussed it, but I did refer the application to the building inspector for the determination of the use. He provided a list of each of the buildings and what he believes is the use of each of those buildings, which, that's correct.
So there's certain uses or certain buildings that are being identified as single-family year-round dwellings. And there are others, which I presume are the ones that haven't been fixed up, that are being identified as seasonal summer dwellings.
I didn't discuss which ones were,
Okay.
how he came up with those determinations, just that's what he determined, so.
Okay, so 25, 29, and 31 are, for instance, single family. So that 25, that's the one that's being occupied, right?
Yes.
So that's 25, 29, this one's
Yes.
also occupied. That's 31, and 41. So those are the ones that, so
Right.
Ben is identifying any of the properties that have been fixed up to a state that they're now year-round occupancy as single-family dwellings. And actually, there should be a two-family, right?
41 is a dispute between Ben and I right now, whether it's a one-family or two-family, but that matter
Okay.
will go back to him when the time is right. We're preparing the documents on that issue.
And so just to add on that too, one of the things that we did need to clarify from the last meeting was which buildings are actually subject to the COA application. There was some confusion because there were 15 building permits submitted. Buildings.
Would you speak up?
What he's saying is that part of the application for the COA does not include the year-round buildings. All of them are excluded from this application. They're already in existence, they're already occupied. The COA is strictly for those buildings that are currently in need of repair.
So those are the one, well, beyond need of repair, they're,
Not all of them beyond, it's a judgment call, and that's what we'll be going through with the building department, determining. Now, as far as the uses, again, I'm going to go back to the issue. This application is only merely about fixing these buildings up. They're not about the use, what we will not, or we can or cannot do with the building. I have not seen Ben's report, but I did walk the property with him. And and we both agreed that there is not a discussion needed at this point as to what the uses would be. The more important point is getting the buildings back up into shape that they need to be. If Ben decides that the building is not capable of being restored, then he'll deal with it at that point, because the one building that is on the ground, he said there is a potential that building can be rebuilt, but that's a whole new gamut of things to do.
so this is 59.
This is, welcome to 59.
So I don't even know how it got a 911 address, frankly.
Anything with a structure, lane, even on the ground, got a 911 address because it's for emergency purposes. God forbid anything happens, the emergency units know where to go. They're not guessing where 59 is, because 59 is still there.
But it's barely
No,
there.
I get that, but
It's just for wayfinding purposes for
yeah,
emergency.
yeah, but Ben said that building can be rebuilt, but it's not an issue to be addressed,
So-
meaning that it would have to be cleared out and it would be rebuilt from scratch under current codes.
So-
But again, that's why we're not here. We're not here for that particular building at this point.
But that one isn't on your list.
Correct, and that one is not going to be touched
Okay.
until down the road anyway. I think I got enough work to do there for a while.
So, is there anything else you want to cover at this point?
Not from my perspective.
Okay. Ashley?
The only other thing, I think we talked about the GML referral, so that's going out, so that'll be then 30 days at least for whenever you'll potentially get their comments. And then a public hearing, that is something that can be waived if the planning board, in your discretion, finds that the project will not result in a significant avoidable diminution of the historical character of the regulated structure or property, and that the alteration would be appropriate in relation to any other regulated structure existing or proposed within 300 feet after applying the standards set forth in this section. Just mention the public hearing, and I don't believe that you've come to a decision.
Start to my left. Nick, do you have any comments?
Not at this time.
Jeff?
Yeah. Mr. Joy, in your response letter to Sean's comments, I guess, the one dated July 27th on the top of page 2, you're talking about the issue of pre-existing non-conforming use and whether that's relevant to the COA. There's a sentence in there, a portion of which says, there are many permitted uses under the code that the buildings could feasibly be used for. And I'm wondering if you could give us some examples of what those permitted uses under the code are. I understand the applicant hasn't decided what he's going to use the property for yet, but you're suggesting that there are many permitted uses under the code. I'm just wondering what those are.
I don't have the code section in front of me, and I don't know off the top of my head, but we could certainly submit that. And I want to say there are maybe in the neighborhood of 10 permitted uses because this is because of the historical designation, the code gives you more options. So, just off the top of my head, single-family residential and a variety of accessory uses.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to get some more details on that
Sure.
when you can provide it. Thank you.
Any comments?
With respect to having it put out to a public forum, I think that is a good idea.
Everybody agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
I certainly don't think we're in a position to waive public comment or public hearing.
Okay, and then I think it's a matter of timing.
Yep.
So, if these are repaired, because part of what we're approving is siding and trim and roofing, correct?
That's the only thing you're approving. You're not approving any uses. I'm not going into the uses. I'm not going to even hesitate to determine what those uses are, because this board's own comment in the very, very beginning of this matter was this is something new to you. It's something new to us. I only want the buildings fixed. And if you're going to hold me up on the uses, you're fighting a losing battle, because I'm not going to give that determination, because even Ben comes to the same point I do. We got to fix the building before we can figure anything out.
but
I'm
here's-
not addressing uses in this particular application.
But
I do
here's-
give the board the idea that I do have to come back to you no matter what for uses down the road. But I can get the buildings fixed just purely on a COA to fix the buildings, or I'll go with the code that says I can fix this structurally, like I pointed out last time. But we're not going to get into uses. I don't know what the uses are.
So-
I'm not committing to anything.
So Ben has issued a use determination.
No, he did not.
That's what this is.
He gave you an idea what he thinks the use is, but those uses also list does not address the historical. As one of your own board members mentioned in passing, technically, I believe the rec hall could be a venue. But we're not here to address that. If I don't have the infrastructure, we can talk uses all day long. It doesn't mean anything.
So, again, he has issued a use determination, because for you to come in front of us, part of that question mark or part of that application is what are the uses.
Okay, again, I'm going to put strong terms. We are not addressing uses. I'm not giving you anything about uses.
Well, so.
We are strictly worried
so
about the side of the building,
as a-
the roof, and the trim. You
as
want to
a-
hold a public hearing, go right ahead.
As a
But
planning board, we can follow up with the use determination if
yeah,
we
you
want
can,
to.
on the next application,
And
not
that-
this application.
No, under this application, if we wanted to forward it to the ZBA for clarification, we can do
You
that.
want to hold me up, it's not a good idea.
Why?
Because I'm only here to fix up buildings to save this community. Longer you push me off, the more you want to destroy the community. That's the picture I'm getting right now.
What community are you referring
I
to?
want to paint a building, put siding on, structurally fix a building, and that's it.
No, what
I'm not asking to do anything with the building.
I don't understand what community you're referring to. Are you referring
Rest
to?
Haven, they hold me up there.
And I'm not-
Summer,
Excuse me,
Summer,
excuse me,
Summer
excuse
Crest-
me.
Summer
Excuse
Crest
me,
is being
we are
held
not
up.
talking
Probably
about
because I'm
rest-
suing you and you're going to give me a hard time.
All right, this is over. Thank you. If you can't keep control, then we're not going to have this
Stop
in the venue.
stopping me from doing what I do.
No, you are
I'm not
not
addressing uses.
understanding.
I will not address
We're-
uses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do you have, thank you for the threat. Do you,
I'm already suing you for
That-
$7 million.
yes, so thank you for an additional threat,
Politicians are corrupt, like you're trying to stop Summercrest.
which is absolutely irrelevant. Okay. Did you have an opportunity to speak to Ben? Okay, so George, you want to come back up?
So I had an opportunity to speak to Ben. He was not comfortable with issuing the building permit with the notice, with the stop work order. He was, however, comfortable with a conditioned building permit with clear instructions as to when the full building permit could be issued, which I think could easily be addressed within the resolution.
Okay, so he's not entirely comfortable, but if we put parameters
I
upon
think with
it.
the stop work order.
With the stop work order,
Because I think it is a-
since no work would have been started. So
Okay.
he's not,
So I
he can't
think-
stop work that hasn't been started, essentially.
Right, and stop work feels more like there's a violation, so you'd have to violate to get the stop work, which kind of is. So how might we amend then this resolution if we want to allow them to just obtain a building permit but not commence construction until we have that letter from O&R?
That's correct.
I'm going to send you right now, Bonnie, I was working on. Sent you one earlier, but ignore that one because then after we had these discussions, I changed it. And it'll say, use this one.
Second one.
At 6:49.
Amended? All right, so we have on the screen.
So the first one, because they had also requested that condition number 5 be deleted, and that required, prior to the issuance of a building permit, that they had to file that amended easement. I understand what George has discussed here based on his conversations with O&R, so I would propose, rather than deleting that, just because you don't have, something from O&R, even though I don't doubt what George says, to amend that to say prior to the issuance of a CO, they have to file the amended easement or proof that O&R is not requiring it. So if O&R says, no, we don't need an amended one, then you're fine. And then the other was number 7. Want me to read it, or?
Prior to commencing any construction activities, applicant shall provide, should it be the planning board and the building inspector? Only because what if that no objection letter has something in it that,
Should it be provided to the planning board? I'm questioning that since the building permit's solely in the building inspector's
Right.
hands.
I think by providing it to the building inspector, and he certainly could consult with Sean, as he does with
okay,
most things.
okay.
I'm sorry, no construction activities or site disturbance shall commence prior to the building department's receipt of O&R's no objection letter.
Of O&Rs. Okay, so instead of commence, it should be, instead of submit, it should be commenced. Can you see that? I'll read it, George. Prior to commencing any construction activities, the applicant shall provide the building inspector with a fully executed copy of O&R's no objection letter agreement setting forth O&R's conditional consent to the improvements within the O&R easement area shown as a 130-foot wide area on the site plan. The applicant shall be required to comply with all conditions of O&R's conditional consent letter agreement within the 135-foot wide easement area as a continuing condition of this approval. In the event this condition is not satisfied prior to issuance of a building permit, as shall be a condition of any building permit issued, that no construction activity or site disturbance shall commence prior to the building department's receipt of O&R's no objection letter.
That's okay with me.
That works for us. We'll get O&R. O&R, that's their language, so it's fine with them.
And
And
just
just
to be
that
clear,
last one final, where I've said in that last line, building department's receipt, I'm just going to change that to building inspector's receipt to be consistent.
and this is commencing any construction activities anywhere on the site, right? Not just the 135-foot easement area? Okay.
Anywhere, correct.
So I would just add anywhere on the site. That's 7 with those adjustments. Ashley? So applicant, any comments? Any other comments?
We're great. That works for us.
Okay.
I'm just trying.
Please don't. All right, board members, anything? Okay,
And in that letter, I think anywhere should be one word, not two.
anywhere, okay. We'll make that change. So with that, I'll make a motion that the planning board approve the 4th amended resolution of conditional approval for RD Management LLC, BJ's Wholesale Club Automotive Fueling Station and Pad Restaurant Site. May I have a second?
Second.
And then Noreen? That was Nick.
Bonnie Franson,
Aye?
Aye.
Bob Garzak,
Aye.
Dylan Penn.
Aye.
Approved.
Very much.
The 4th time be the
Well,
charm.
hopefully we won't see you. May you get your no objection letter. All right, I would like to take a brief break and go into attorney-client. I apologize. We're going to take a brief break. George, we're taking a brief break. Next item on the agenda, Monroe Commons, if you'd come on up. George, you there? Thank you, George.
Members of the board. As you recall, my name is Dan Richmond. I'm with the law firm Zarin and Steinmetz. With me is my colleague Jacqueline Cohn from Zarin and Steinmetz and John Dahlgren, Tim Miller Associates.
Yes, please.
We have gone through your most recent round of your comments and consultant comments. We submitted a letter dated July 27th addressing them. It is our intention to submit a absolutely complete document by the end of this month so that hopefully your board can vote in September on completeness and start the review, the public review of the document. Again, recognizing that this is, I wouldn't quite say the very beginning of the project, but we're still at a stage that allows for plenty of public input and more consultant substantive comments. But we are ready. We think it's time to move forward. And we're hoping this evening, we haven't received any memos in response to the letter, but there are a couple of items in the letter, and I brought extra copies if your board would need, that we'd like to go over to make sure we're on the same page so that we know exactly what we need to do to get to completeness on, by the end of this month.
Thank you. Before we start, I'm going to ask Sean and Ashley, from your perspective, where we are in the process and what are the next steps to get us to the path of completeness.
As far as procedure, you've reviewed the DEIS and I think a couple of submissions. At this point, you had most recently determined that it was still incomplete. There were some outstanding consultant comments, and now Mr. Richmond and his team submitted responses to those, identifying if they think things are beyond the scope or if they're going to be submitting something in the future to address it, then they're indicating that as well. So it's really now, I think they're looking for direction from the board, whether they agree with their position on some of these. And that's.
So I only have responses to what my comments were that the applicant feels are beyond the scope. So I don't know if you want me to get into the weeds yet or if you want to start from the beginning, since mine are, I guess, the second letter that they have in their response letter. So
I guess overall, I mean, what makes sense in terms of how to tackle this, because this is a lot. But I think there are responses that you've indicated we will do that. So perhaps we should focus on the responses or your responses where you feel that it can really be deferred, or, you know, to a substantive comment, or that, you know, it's not relevant, let's say, one or the other. So, you know, I don't know how many of there are of this, but.
I mean, I'm happy to start with Sean's comments first, or our response to Sean's comments. Otherwise, you know, I think it ends up being maybe 10 to 15 comments. I think we can go through pretty quickly that just deal with looking for clarification on certain points, and, you know, again, just to make sure we're on the same page, there are certain items we do think are beyond the scope or were not in previous scoping comments and should not be. I can to handle it like I'm happy to take this in any order the board may like. I'm happy to go through it in the order we address them in the letter from Tim Miller Associates that you have, or, you know, if you want to start with Sean's comments, however you'd like to do this.
I would suggest that we go through your comment letter. Well,
Okay.
I guess Tim Miller Associates letter. and highlight those that you believe you need some input from the board.
Does everyone have a copy of the letter? Because I do have extra copies if anyone needs a copy.
And just to clarify too, if there's any clarification that's desired from any of the other consultants, I believe we've said in the past to reach out directly. I think you've been in, I'll take one. Been in touch with AKRF about something, so same goes for all the consultants. If there's something, don't hesitate to reach out to them directly.
Yes.
And I do have it up on the screen, so if anybody doesn't have a copy or the audience is looking, they can see it there. So you just let me know where you want us to navigate to. And if the board wants us to stop on any particular items, let me know.
So, an comment on page, this is more by way of clarification, or we're hoping for some direction. On page 3 of the letter, and it comes up several times throughout the comments, requesting us confirm that the VMG connection is authorized, and also that the Village of Curious Joel have letters.
Actually, why don't you hand it to Noreen? And, the consultants can take a look at it. It's just so that it's a record, and then they can make copies for us. Oh, okay. So you have copies for everyone? Oh, okay.
We would just like to, if we could get your board, we'd like,
Or sort of like willingness to serve letters?
if this is okay, if these boards are acceptable for the purposes of confirming that the VMG connection is okay with VMG, and that the Village of Curious Joel would be willing to.
So is it that the consultant was asking for more than that? Or is essentially this is what we've been looking for?
This is our understanding
Thank
of
you.
what the board is looking for. And again, taking a step back, our goal is to submit a complete document by September, by the end of this month, so that, your board can vote on completeness in September. So our hope is that if we think this letter is adequate, we think this letter meets what your consultants are looking for, but we'd like to know now if they're looking for something other or further, or if they're adequate, we can move on to focus on other stuff.
Looking quickly at the letter, the will serve letter regarding water, I don't think it says that there is adequate capacity, that the village has the, sufficient capacity. I know they talk about the capacity, or the proposed, the proposed usage rather, but I think the question would be that they're willing and that they're able, that there's, sufficient capacity, and also the sewer as well.
The sewer is a different issue.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. In terms of water, which is what the comments, again, we're looking for, if that's the only comment, is that an issue, Joe? Something.
Okay, and also, I guess, just to be clear, in that second paragraph, it says that they're in agreement to supply the water at the required level, but does that mean at the proposed, I guess basically what the board would be looking for is that we understand this is their usage, we have the capacity to provide that, and we are willing to provide that amount.
So I gave you my last copy of the letter, but doesn't the letter say this is, you understand?
You have to talk into the
Okay. The letter, I believe, says this is what we understand is the water demand for the project and that we're willing to
I think
provide that.
it says 54,210
It
gallons
says
per day.
that, but then it goes on, it says that they will provide it at the required level. Is the required level meaning that usage?
Yeah.
Okay, the wording of that was just,
Are they going to rewrite this letter for you? Are you going to ask for a revised letter?
Well, again, if if there are clarifications that your board is looking for, again, that's why we're raising it to your board this evening, to make
Okay.
sure we're on the same page.
So are you of the opinion that they should submit a revised letter just for clarification and clarity?
good for the letter to clarify that they do in fact have the capacity. Because if they say they didn't and there had to be, something done to ensure that they did, then that of course would be an impact.
Okay, so maybe
My understanding is that the village is, finalizing its efforts to, ensure, it has the capacity. They're working on a water pipeline, as I think your board is aware.
Oh, you're talking about the overall water pipeline to the village? Okay. So is there a way that we can rely on this letter, at least for completeness, but then in the substantive comments, indicate that the applicant has to demonstrate that they will be connected to whatever water supply, or is that really at the completeness stage? I'm trying to figure out what can then become a substantive comment.
I don't think necessarily that
To be able to ask them the particulars and the details as a substantive comment. Because right now, we do have a letter where they say they'll supply the water, but it begs a question for us, from a substantive perspective, perhaps, well, where are you getting the water, and do you have the capacity, as you're saying? So that would be like the substantive comment, the follow-up.
Right, so, yeah,
really this comment, which it wasn't one of mine, but I think I had something similar where the DEI had said that they were in discussions where now now they actually have something showing that there's a willingness from the village, so that wasn't there previously, so to update the text to actually be more firm about that there's, include this, of course, and then
Yeah, I
that's
think,
what the
yeah,
completeness comment was.
at least from my perspective, and again, board members weigh in, I think for now, there's a letter that says they will supply the water. And I think in terms of substantive follow-up comments, we could say, okay, well, how are you going to do that? Do you have the capacity? If you would agree to that. Yes.
respond to that in the FEIS.
Yes. Is that okay?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, so
Okay.
that letter's,
Is that okay?
That works for me.
Great.
Okay. Okay.
in the VMG letter,
So the BMG letter. Okay, so my only reaction to this is I don't know who Akiva Klein is. And so it's Integris Equity LLC, but I need something that indicates they are VMG. I assume they are, but I right, from the owner, or I don't know who this is. So it'd just be useful to, yes. Any other comments on that, board members? Thoughts?
No, that's just what I was thinking.
Just one, electric and gas. I know this specifically says water and sewer, but I'm not sure how you're bringing in electric and gas, if you're going to need that noted as well.
From VMG,
Will you
from
be,
the street.
How are you going to be connecting? Is it going to be through VMG?
All utilities.
Yeah, including but not limited to, and then add those four.
Right.
Right, water, sewer, electric, gas.
Right.
If they need it, could be coming off of,
Could be coming off Nininger, but. Right, right. Right. And they just increased that 105, yeah, yeah.
good with that?
Yep, I think
Okay.
we're on those. Our next
Other direction.
Page 8, number 29. It's our understanding that the crash history is sufficient. I mean, the response that we got from AKRF says, comment partially address additional analysis will provide it in a future submission, which we read as a substantive comment on the DEIS. And we just, again, for our objective being to submit a complete document, we want to make sure we're addressing everything that needs to be addressed. Are we good here?
I think we may need AKRF to clarify what they
Yeah.
meant by that. I don't know if, because I know at some parts in the DEIS document itself, it says that additional document or additional analysis will be provided in further submission, so I don't know if it's referring to a statement in the DEIS that said that, or what's meant by there, but.
I would suspect that the particular issue in that section 9.1 that they're talking about is provide a detailed discussion of locations with notable crash history, i.e. high crash locations, and identify potential improvement measures for these locations if applicable. If I remember correctly from my reading, that might be what they're suggesting, is that they need more of a detailed discussion of the crash history, the particulars, and potential improvements. I think that the other things that are mentioned there in section 9.1, what's been submitted already covers. And I mean, of course, consult AKRF for details on that, but I think that's what they're probably suggesting might need additional analysis.
All right, so is that,
So maybe we'll just have a follow-up with AKRF? Perhaps it is, yeah. We'll get clarity from them.
all right, or if we could reach out to them directly?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think it's ambiguous, so we're not sure what has and what hasn't been addressed, so.
Page 13, it's a spillover of comment 56 and 57. They're sort of related. This has to do with the demographic and economic data for Orange County and the town of Monroe, which we provided. We understand that there's some question, or AKRF raised, that we should be addressing both the county and the town consistently, and I think we're going to do that. But I think, other than that, we understand that the information has been provided. And we're hoping for clarity on that. And again, maybe that's something we need to talk to AKRF about, because, again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there may be some, it would not be surprising if there's some tables where you don't need that information because you don't need the comparison. It just, I would ask them, and then if there's a difference of opinion, then, submit to back to us what that difference is so we can resolve it.
Okay. How would we do that? Because
Yeah.
there's some time constraints to get this.
Yeah, I think let's figure out what we can do. We may be having a special meeting Not that we would specifically have this as a agenda item, but perhaps we can get our clarifications at that meeting. Yeah, so the sooner you contact them, the better, because we're going to try and figure out. So that was on page 13, right? Okay.
Page 24 has to do with alternatives. The scoping document says that we're supposed to provide like a tabular comparison of them. We just want to make sure we're on the same page. We don't need to do a separate plan for each of these different alternatives. I think it was suggested in one of their earlier.
Which particular comment? Because we're in alternatives.
Really
In
like
112?
113, 114, it comes up a couple of times, 115. Scope asks for is a narrative description of each alternative and a summary of the comparative analysis in tabular form, which is what we're intending to provide.
Correct.
I mean, so I think typically with alternatives, you would describe, and then I know in EISs I've worked on, you might say wetland impacts. And then in that table, you would have like no issue, no action as of right, lesser build, and you might say, wetland disturbances, 0.5, 0.2, 0.3, but it's just to kind of compare impacts of the various alternatives, whether it's financial, demographic, trips. It's kind of common way of showing, easily what the differences are.
Plan to have a table comparing like general impacts such as, impervious surface,
Right.
Footprint of the building
Right.
size, so forth. So
Yeah, numeric numbers, not
Right.
just like more or less, but
Right,
actual,
right.
right. But I think, well, I guess that maybe that's where you're going with the discussion about a plan, because to get to those numbers, do you have to almost have drawn like a bit of a plan to know what those numbers are? Is that what the issue is? Or you don't think so?
well, we'll provide a brief sketch plan for these because that's how we derive the numbers.
Right.
So, but other than that, we're not.
We're not asking, I don't think, for fully engineered plans. It's just show us that you've conceptually addressed that alternative, which is where you're deriving those numbers from.
Correct.
Okay.
I think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah.
I think as long as you're providing us a sketch plan.
I think some level of grading has to be performed, though, in order to make sure that it's buildable. So I'm not asking, I'm asking for in between a sketch with just boxes shown, but some level of grading to understand the impacts to, for example, wetlands.
So something with so when you show this conceptually, something that shows, at least a limit of disturbance, because if you're grading out something with different alternatives, there may be more disturbance. So kind of
Right.
in that sketch, having at least the limits.
Right, but how do you derive the limits without showing the grading?
I think I think that's where we're talking about. The scope doesn't require plans. We're happy to do sketch plans for the purpose of assisting in the table that the scope does call for. But I think calling for full grading plans for each of these plans.
And I don't think that's what it was. I think there needs to be, I think the sketch plan is you submitted some way to evaluate what's going to be in the table. So however, that level of detail to show that, the categories of impacts, what they're going to be in comparison for each one.
Because I think what could happen, you could do that for completeness, and then you may comment that this is unrealistic because there's a whole area that would have to be graded to, so it may be raised as a substantive comment down the line if the numbers don't appear realistic, I guess.
That would be a fair
But then
way
that's
of
kind of
handling this.
after the fact.
How do you, what the numbers are in the chart without knowing what the limits of disturbance are.
Did the sketch plats at all have any topo on them? Okay.
We're starting with the existing grades. And
Okay.
then, to put in parking lots and so forth, these plans are going to be conceptual. So I'll check with our engineer, Peter Zackenfow, about grading
Okay.
and whether that will be provided.
Even if it's just some, again, I think some kind of sense of the grading to be able to do a limits of disturbance.
I don't think it needs to be a 1 or 2 foot contour. I think it can be a 10 or 20 foot contour. So that it's not, you're not spending weeks grading these different alternatives. It's
a reasonable
a
alternative.
reasonable alternative, right?
Right, so not like you're doing any full grading or anything, but I would say, again, enough to say that you would have had to have disturbed an area to get to grade.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You kind of have a sense? Okay. So that was, I'm sorry, that was 116? Kind of that area in there? Okay.
Sorry, I
No
can,
problem.
I can
You-
hear
you're-
you
you're-
here,
you're being good.
but I won't hear you later.
Okay. Our next question or comment is on page 25. We said that, again, that a site development, one of the alternatives was not financially viable. And then AKRF asked for additional explanation or a specific threshold of what constitutes a financially viable footprint or scale. I think that goes well beyond, as we explained in our letter, what is contemplated under SECRA in terms of alternatives, which are intended to be alternative analysis that meets the applicant's objectives. I think there's ample case law, which I could cite, that says that economic analysis isn't part of the SECRA determination.
I'm sorry, which comment are you on?
115 on page 25.
115 on page 25.
So I think the issue here, as I understand it, was that they hadn't provided an alternative that was no variance, no zoning amendment, no wetlands permit, which now they've indicated they will provide. So I think instead they'd said that there's no financially feasible plan. So in response to that, AKRF said, well, the scope requires you to provide this. You're saying it's not financially viable, then give us some more
Support for
information
that.
on that. But if they're
Right.
going to be providing something that meets all of those requirements of the alternative, that there's no wetlands permit, no variance, et cetera, then I believe that would satisfy them.
So in other words, you'll provide us with a concept plan that meets those requirements? Or
We're coming up with an alternative that doesn't require, the wetlands permits and variances. So I guess this comment won't apply if we provide that alternative.
Well,
Well, I think, I was just going to say, I think what you could do is you could show that, right? Something that doesn't require all that, and then say, but this alternative doesn't meet our economic objectives, and therefore, we don't believe this is viable. Just in concept, to say what that would look like. Maybe that's a 30,000 square foot building, and say, but this doesn't meet our objectives and it's not viable.
I think we're in agreement that first we provide the plan that
Yeah.
needs no variances.
Right.
And then that doesn't meet the applicant's,
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, so in other words, I
Wording
think,
basically does not meet.
Well, no,
change
because
the
the plan that was submitted still required wetland permit. So I think that comment, as I understood it in the DEIS, was that we can't provide something that doesn't require a wetlands permit because that won't be an economical, feasible building for us.
Yeah,
So I think if you show the plan and then explain why it's not in your goals or your objectives, that's different than just not providing it.
yeah, I think from my perspective, what you're going to end up showing is, without the zoning text amendments, it's going to require a heck of a lot of parking. And so if you were to somehow meet the parking, you're definitely going to affect overall the scale of the development just to meet that existing zoning. And again, I think you show, we can have a 400,000 square foot building, or it might end up being 100,000 because we had to meet the parking demand. And that's not feasible for us financially.
Equally and similarly, to fit within all those constraints may only allow a facility that would allow the retail uses you propose without the office, without the hotel, and that becomes the reason why it's not a viable plan, is because it doesn't meet you have three objectives technically with one building, one property, and maybe what would fit would only fit one of those or two of those. Okay, then that becomes the reason why it's not viable. But you should tell us why it's not viable, I think, is what it comes down to. Right.
Simplify why it doesn't meet the objectives.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll show the concept and then why it's not viable. Great, okay?
Next question. 6. I guess it's 121 and 120. Relates to growth-inducing impacts. I think we set forth and we explained in the DIS that the types of jobs that this project will create is likely to draw from the local market, is unlikely to attract people to move to the area. So a lot of the potential impacts, including potential growth, increased residential growth, and associated demands on infrastructure such as water quality, wastewater, we think we've addressed, and we're not clear what more could be added to that point.
And I guess one issue that we have with the comment is the AQRF is, and it's in the scope, is looking for a quantitative assessment of potential or additional residential and commercial growth. That's I think a little hard to estimate and to project, because we're saying that most of the potential workers at this site come from the area and won't be moving. Get additional commercial and residential growth.
I can clarify one thing what John said. The scoping document says we'll quantitatively address where applicable, and we just don't think it's applicable here because we don't see this having the growth-inducing impacts that AQRF is.
Do we talk about how many jobs you do estimate would be generated?
Oh, yes, yes.
So all that's part of the fiscal.
Sure, that's in the fiscal analysis.
I disagree a little bit with the contention that the majority of the employees in the new site won't come from Monroe, and certainly I hope that many of them do. I think the contention that it's not going to draw people to move to Monroe because they're working there is correct. I think that there'll be a limited number of jobs on site where it'll generate the kind of income that would give people the ability to move, necessitate the moving, make them want to move to this area. Certain management level jobs might provide that, but we're talking about a lot of general retail jobs, general office jobs, general hotel jobs. That's the majority of the jobs. There are people in this community who I'm sure will love to work there, and again, I hope they do because it's great for our citizens, and those people are not commuting far to work, so there's not a lot of pollution in the air. But I certainly agree, once Monroe has provided all the employees that it's going to provide, the rest of the employees are going to come from outside the area, and they're going to remain living outside the area. I don't think that's a tough contention, but I do think that there will be. My only point is I think that there will be some more of a segment of the people in Monroe who choose to work here than perhaps the EIS suggests so far.
So do you think it's more a perspective of acknowledging it qualitatively as opposed to quantitatively?
Exactly.
Acknowledge it more qualitatively than quantitatively.
Correct, and that's what we prefer to do.
So not to actually say they're going to be X number of
New houses.
Or X number, but to acknowledge that there is a population base here, that there will be a demand placed on employment.
But I do think it's fair to say that there won't be a lot of new residents in Monroe generated by this development.
So, I mean, one of the ways you can. Well,
And I think, honestly, frankly, from that whole section, I think you do a fairly good job of going through each of the impacts and laying them out to the best of your ability.
I know
in my opinion.
I know one of the ways we've done it is just to say, there's always trends on unemployment in the county. And if you look at the county and you know that it's like a 5% unemployment rate, you can say that means that there are X jobs within the county that are not filled. And if you're drawing from the county, you're not drawing from a large area, you're drawing from a fairly immediate area. So maybe there's a way to kind of look at what the available pool may be. Again, I'm just trying to get, a combination of qualitative and quantitative. Does that make sense?
Just to be clear, we're just talking about the growth-inducing section.
Understood.
I think the issues you're raising may be addressed in the physical impact section. What we're addressing is right now, we have in the DIS that they're going to be about somehow between 624, 682 jobs created. The majority of the new jobs will be retail and service jobs. Those employees are not expected to move to the area. A portion of the development's management and a small proportion of workers may relocate to the area, creating an incremental demand for new housing and community services, such as schools, water, sewer. But the project is not anticipated to have a significant growth-inducing impact on adjoining municipalities. We think that covers this, again, what the scope is looking for. And again, to quantify it beyond that, I think is.
But why don't, may I suggest this then? Try and tackle it in some way. Send us a red line version of how you would address it, and we'll take a look at it. So if you address it a little in more detail qualitatively.
I don't know. I mean, we can address it, but again, the comment is that we should have a quantitative analysis of potential new residential commercial growth.
Yeah, and I think that we're acknowledging quantitatively, I don't know that that's going to ultimately be a really useful number because you just don't necessarily know. I mean, I could tell you right now that because of the significant growth in our area, there are many workers that have been brought in from the outside. So we know that there's growth-inducing things going on within our community right now. But if I had to quantify that, it'd be very difficult. So I think if you acknowledge it qualitatively, and again, just look at what you have there, see if you want to make edits, and then you can send it to us redline and we'll take a look at it. That's my suggestion. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I guess now we're getting into Sean's memo. Sean, I don't know if you want to take the lead, or you want us to take the
Sure.
lead, because we
I-
outlined what our issues are.
Yeah, I think I could take the lead. So I think you're going to number 2, right, with regards to the geotechnical analysis that was provided?
27, yeah, starting there, number 2 on page 27.
So I had asked for additional additional geotechnical data be provided. So to date, the DEIS provides the existing well data log to evaluate the existing geotechnical data and groundwater locations. I'm asking for additional geotechnical data to be provided to understand the need for rock excavation and blasting, specifically within the building and the deep excavations on the site, to understand if a blasting plan will be needed and understand the noise better. So just asking for more of that data.
Well,
What's required by the scope? What does the
Right,
scope
so-
say? Does it say you're required to have a geotech
Yeah,
investigation?
and we did provide a geotechnical assessment with a number of soil borings and test pits. I'm not sure if you reviewed that report by.
Right, but we got the test bits, but they weren't to the elevations of, and I believe you noted that they're not to the elevation of where the deepest excavations will be.
Correct. So alternatively, I guess the assumption here is that blasting may be needed, and then if it is needed, we can provide in the DEIS the contingency, if blasting is needed, prepare a blasting protocol or blasting plan that, lists, what requirements for blasting on site and so forth. I mean, is that
So, a couple,
adequate?
so, I think you're going to need blasting. Is that safe to say?
I don't think that's clear.
Okay, so, right, so, we
what-
don't know because we don't have the geotech.
Exactly.
To go
No,
to that level.
the geotechnical report indicated that they had auger refusal because of boulders. There's a lot of large boulders on the site. Those don't necessarily need to be blasted if they're encountered in the field. With the basement excavation, a lot of those, if they are boulders, could be just removed with a backhoe.
But there were a number of test bits that were not done to the depth of what your excavation is going to be.
the reality is, we're not going to know until we start digging. I mean, we're not going to dig up the entire site at this point.
But you could do a mobile rig that can go to refusal at your required depth at this point. You don't have to excavate in order to determine your rock depth that you're going to have to blast.
Yeah, so,
So I understand, and I'll take a closer look at the geotechnical report, but I believe all the borings were laid out in the footprint of the building, where the greatest excavation was supposed to take place. And that's where the results of the depths were a bit inconclusive because of boulders.
So I'm going to be very practical.
Uh-huh.
So number one, I think you can submit us maybe a memo or doing that review, because I think what Sean's saying is he did that review and he doesn't see that the geotech or the borings were done to a depth which reflects what the grading is. So if you disagree, submit a memo, number one. Number two, we have a project right now in the town where, in fact, the engineer that's representing you, and not that he did the initial, I don't think he did the original, engineering for that project, but is asking to put a whole bunch of fill on the top of a hill, which would require clear cutting about, an acre, I think he said, of woodland, because they didn't estimate the amount of cut and fill properly. So I think we want to, and the option is then, okay, if you have that excess cut, it's not staying on the site. It's going to have to be removed. So I think from my perspective, it'd be good in the EIS that says you're basing your analysis on assuming that a certain amount of cut and fill is going to happen. And if there's anything in excess, it's going to be hauled off, number one. Number two, then the other issue is the blasting.
Right.
Because we don't want a generic blasting plan, we'll want an actual blasting plan.
And just to reiterate, and straight from my comments, their DEIS states, in quotes, bedrock is probably deeper than the required excavation depths, close quotes. So it's unknown at this point.
From a practical perspective, I think, again, where we're virtually, I think, very close to getting DIS completeness, to send us back to start doing more geotechnical data, I think is problematic.
I have a proposal. Can you do the geotech between, so you get your DEIS completeness, but you will do it before we get to FEIS?
But
Because then,
But then we don't have a specific blasting plan for the public to review.
I don't disagree. I mean,
Okay.
that's the risk of waiting.
Board planning on having a public hearing on the FAS as well? I'm assuming not. I mean, some boards typically do that.
Oh, so if we had an FEIS public hearing, then that would take care of the fact that there might be new information in the FEIS?
Correct.
I'd defer to Ashley.
Fair enough.
I mean, that would be one way of overcoming it, but I think that, to Sean's point, I know we want to move the project forward, but it did say geotech, and you're indicating right now there's not sufficient information. But I think if we had that geotech between now and the FEIS, then
As part of the FEIS.
Right, so then, Sean, so let's say you do the geotech, you submit it, and then Sean can issue substantive comments on it as part of the FEIS.
I mean,
So,
it would
like,
be
is it-
submitted before the FEIS is submitted.
Yeah, well, yeah, before the FEIS is
Because-
submitted, so that we reserve the right to have additional substantive comments on the geotech. We're not trying to string out the process, we just want to make sure we have the geotech before FEIS is
Right,
issued.
That's why I'm saying that, I mean, wouldn't the geotech be part of the FEIS?
Well,
I mean, I think we're
ultimately,
saying the
it
same
will
thing.
be, but I don't want, in other words, I don't want you to submit the FEIS with the geotech. I want to be able to get the geotech before you even prepare the FEIS, so that if Sean has comments, those are part of the comments you have to respond to in the FEIS. And that would keep the process moving.
I'm not sure how long it'll take to schedule.
6 to 8 weeks.
Right, 6 to 8 weeks, and then to prepare the report, we're talking probably 3 months, which is, quite a bit of time.
Comment, though, has been, it was part of the scope. Sean raised it in his first round of comments, so it's not anything new.
And back in February, we talked about the geotechnical report. We knew we had to do it. We had a geologist prepare this geotechnical report. A lot of borings and test pits were done. They were inconclusive in certain areas, but a lot of work was done in borings.
Yep. Understood, it just wasn't deep enough, so.
Okay. So you are suggesting further borings in the area of the building foundation?
I'm suggesting that the borings be completed to all required excavation depths. So if you believe that they're already done, then respond that way.
Other than that, that makes sense. We're going to, Bon, she'll be right back. We can continue on. No, she said continue on.
That goes hand in hand. You'll be able to get water from the borings, so.
Comment 10,
Page 28.
page 28. I believe we provided those pre-development peak flows. I want to confirm.
I could look into it, but maybe it's a typo, but
Yeah, did you have any other comments that,
I don't think I have any others. I didn't see any others of yours that you were looking for me to
okay,
clarify.
30, number 21. The request that we get correspondence from the Orange County Sewer District. As we noted in our response, that's not required by the scoping document. The scoping document just talks about the identification of available capacity, which we will do.
Okay. So I feel like that the only way you can get that is from Orange County Sewer District, but if you can get it other means, then I guess that's fine.
Data from the Orange County Sewer District, but we're not going to get a letter from the Orange
Okay,
County Sewer
fair
District.
enough. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think we have any more on Sean's comments then.
So that was resolved? So, okay, okay, we'll move on. Okay. Okay, meeting adjourned.
The next is we have several comments on CHA's comments beginning on page 31. For example, I mean, it's not numbered, but for example, the second, or her comment partially addressed, a gravel access road associated with the well has been identified, the applicant is proposing. Again, it's our view, there's nothing identified there that's missing. To the extent it's a substantive comment, I mean, I'm not sure if it's even that, but we just want to be clear again at this point, there's not, that we're not leaving anything outstanding.
Yeah, I think what's confusing to me, it says comment partially addressed. So it says, so you did address the gravel road. Is there anything else that would potentially disturb the wetlands, let's say during construction or at some other time? I mean, I could look at it as, if that's all you've disclosed, that's all you can do.
Comment that we're responding to previous was, does not mention the gravel access road for well drilling.
Right.
And now we addressed it.
It went on to say, or the new water supply wells, because that was before, I think you changed to municipal water, so.
Oh, okay. So if it's municipal water, now you're not going to be putting
You're not gonna be-
wells that may be drawing down from the wetlands. Perhaps that's what it is.
But I think you could reach out to Dave Tompkins just to.
Clarify.
number of comments from Dave Tompkins that I guess we should clarify with him, because they're,
But I think it's important to bring to your board's attention, because again, we are trying to get this to completeness by the end of this month, that, you know, many of the comments from him, from CHA, in our view, are ambiguous, don't, you know, like, say comment partially addressed, but then don't point to missing information. So we'll talk to him, but.
Yeah, I think just have that conversation.
we can talk to him.
I mean, if it's useful and you want one of our consultants to be on, perhaps that can be arranged so you're all hearing. Like Ashley or Sean, our regular consultants.
Go through the rest of his comments.
Is it wherever they're partially addressed?
actually. Well, I think there's like, for example, on page 33, where we say, the original comment was proposed wetland mitigation area. No discussion regarding conclusion that there was no option to avoid or minimize. And then when on resubmittal, the comment is, comment not addressed, avoidance or minimization of direct impacts to onsite wetland was briefly discussed,
What page are you on?
page 33.
Or top, bottom, midway?
About 3/4 down.
Oh, the option to avoid or minimize direct impact? So I think, it seems to me he's saying, what is the reason or why can't you avoid or minimize a direct impact? Sufficient documentation was provided to substantiate any effort to reduce the impact.
Yeah, because the scope says, provide all necessary data to support a conclusion that there's no option to avoid or minimize the direct impact. So I don't know what data was provided or what, he might be looking for there, but.
Well, the other way we can handle this is that's your position and it's going to end up being raised as a substantive comment, I guess. That
I think if
the
there was
there's
some
an
type of
impact.
data and he's saying the data is insufficient, I think it could go either way.
Right,
Because the scope requires all necessary data, but.
Yeah, which would be a
You could-
completeness issue.
But it could,
But he could also raise it as this is a significant impact but that hasn't been mitigated because there's no information provided to support the need for the impact or something like that. I don't know. I'm just trying to see, is there a way to address it as a substantive comment? Because there is a fine line sometimes, and I don't think seeker requires, you do the best that you can to have a complete document, but sometimes things do get to substantive.
Point, Madam Chair, seeker is guided by a rule of reason that specifically says you don't study every conceivable impact, every conceivable data point, and the regulations themselves say that in EIS is meant to be something that's readable by the public and not encyclopedic.
So I think from my perspective, I could look at it and say, let's say you indicated that there's going to be X amount of impacts to the wetland, and I may argue, well, that's a significant adverse impact because you haven't, mitigated it. And then you're going to have to explain why you didn't mitigate it. So, you can turn that around into a substantive comment, I think. Because we'll then argue, there really isn't any substantiation of why you need this impact if you could do it differently. And that becomes a substantive comment.
So handle this as a substantive comment,
I-
which is, I think, our point.
I think so. I think you should try and address as many as possible, but maybe in the memo, in the comment, so are you going to do another comment letter?
I don't think we're going to be doing another comment letter. I think our intention is to finish the EIS, the DEIS, for completeness. So, again, if there are specific issues that we can run through, I think we earlier talked about there was one specific narrow issue, maybe run by some language. But, we've got limited time and resources that we want to devote to the.
Because this is still going to go back to the other consultants for their, right? Because it's going to be a DEIS completeness review. At that time, we can ask them, when you submit your memo, indicate what you're going to raise as a substantive comment if it wasn't addressed, versus what you think has to be addressed. What can be, May will say, please be specific about what they can address as substantive.
The consultants believe is
Yeah,
substantive.
yeah.
Again, they could say, I think that's, again, there was an earlier AKRF comment that we spoke about, that I think that was their intention, is that they'll additional comments to follow, meaning when the DIS is accepted as complete.
Right. I know that we've done that. We've said, all right, move forward to completeness, but just like we were talking about geotech, but you're going to provide that, between FEIS, whatever, or substantive comment will be raised. I would talk to them, and then we can follow up with CHA in terms of, where there's disagreement as to something not being addressed. Okay.
We'll give them a call
Yeah.
soon, like tomorrow or so.
Yes.
All right, so with that, again, there are a lot of comments we'll go through with CHA. And I think we can skip their comments for today. Next. Comment, page 37. This Sampson. Honestly, I have a little hard time honestly understanding their comment, except I understand from John, and John, maybe you can explain in a little more detail that he's asking for a level of groundwater analysis that wasn't required by the scope. And again, because we're going for public water, doesn't seem to be relevant at this point.
Right, so when the scope was initially prepared, we were proposing wells and groundwater supply, and groundwater and its potential effect on the local aquifer and possibly other wells was a relevant issue. Right now, we're proposing public water supply, so we're really not drawing from the aquifer. And so assessing aquifer conditions really doesn't apply, with the exception of our potential impact for water quality to the aquifer. And that we see as relevant, in terms of potential spills, runoff, that sort of thing from the development. But other than that, to study the groundwater levels isn't.
Were you proposing wells in the very beginning, and then you switched to municipal?
Correct.
Okay. So, I think that was a project change, and I don't think, I think we can ask Weston and Sampson, given that change, what isn't needed any longer because of that change? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of these analyses have to do with assumptions that they would be on individual water supply there at the site.
Correct.
So I think maybe you follow up?
Yep, I will.
Okay. So Sean will follow up.
Okay. And we do think that there are a couple comments at the end of his letter related to water quality, groundwater water
Right.
quality.
And maybe recharge.
And recharge.
Yeah.
Yes. And how the stormwater will affect the wetlands, and
Yeah.
that's sort of related to groundwater too. But
Okay.
that we're covered, and we'll talk about and discuss.
Okay. I think that's reasonable,
Do we need to go through the rest of these?
because there's no need in studying something.
Next comment.
We're very close to the end.
Okay.
Our next comments, our series of comments, have to do with Karen Arendt's letter on landscaping, which Starts on page 52. First three site plan issues or I think the first three comments again are either site plan issues or substantive issues on the DIS, and not appropriate for a completeness determination, not required by the, doesn't point to anything missing per the scope.
I could add, with our last submission, we did provide a much more detailed landscaping plan, and I think may have addressed a bunch of these comments, including how many trees are going to be removed versus how many trees are planted. So we have tables now on the landscaping plan that provides that information. So I think
The landscaping plan's been advanced so that it might be achieving a lot of this?
Right,
Okay.
right.
So it'd be a change in narrative in the EIS to show,
Correct.
okay.
So we'll
I
be
mean, you're sort of
addressing those.
addressing it then. And then,
Yes,
well,
Well,
and then I think to the extent you're not, then that becomes a substantive comment.
okay.
You know, we'll say, we want more rain gardens or more, whatever it is. I mean, that would be one approach. Because this is your proposal as far as green infrastructure, and then the substantive comment would be, you know, we think that you need additional, or whatever it is that the comment is.
Does the DIS identify any, do you describe any green infrastructure? Or if you're saying you're not proposing anything, maybe just specify? Because I'm just reading her comment says that there was no, the scope does say to describe what she's quoted there. So if you're not proposing anything relevant, maybe just say that, or?
We'll provide a discussion of some green infrastructure and provide that. So we'll address that comment.
Again, the landscaping plan has been updated to include some of those measures.
Well, not green infrastructure, but so there, you know, things like solar panels and car charging, EV charging stations, that's separate, that's a different comment. But as far as the landscaping plan, you know, with plantings and number of trees planted and where, that's been addressed. But we will talk about.
She was talking about, for instance, plant islands, vegetated swales, kind of like when you go to Lowe's over in Chester. They have these infiltration basins in the landscaping that's in the parking lot. So is any of that proposed or no?
I will have to check, I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Okay. Let's do a little more research there in terms of, I think we all have to see how the landscape plan evolved.
It might just be then adding descriptions to explain what's on the plan?
Correct.
And you might say, you know, we're meeting whatever New York State DEC stormwater management guidelines require in terms of meeting green infrastructure. And then beyond that, we're providing other types of green infrastructure, you know, but for whatever, you know, provide the reasons why you might not go beyond that. Because I think, don't the stormwater guidelines require a certain amount of?
They do,
Yeah.
right.
So somehow there has to be something integrated to meet that requirement in the SWIP, in the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. Sorry about acronyms. That it?
That concludes our, I don't know if your board has any other comments or questions.
All have any comments, or you're good? Any comments? No?
Just a couple of things.
Sure.
I think a number of my observations really relate to site planning, and I can hold off on those. But there were a few things. So the transit routes, the landscape plan, the architecturals are all part of the DEIS, correct? That they're all supplemental to that.
That's correct. The
Okay.
plans really are part of the DEIS.
Right. So just some things in relation to that. On the landscape plan, on the east end of the building, there's a little parklet, and something that refers to stairs, nature walk stairs. It's unclear from the plans or from anything I remember in the narrative what nature walk that refers to, but it goes off property, and I'm not sure where do those stairs lead you to? What does that continue to? What's being really proposed there
Yeah, because
with
that's
this nature
the
walk?
Village of KJ's sanitation property now.
It might even, yeah, it might
think
be
it
that,
is.
it might be behind that, but I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think it's onto the applicant's Woodbury property.
No, I think.
I don't think it leads to there, so
I think it's next to Lake Region. I seem to
Right.
remember, right?
Yeah.
So that's now, that property I think is owned by Village of Curious Joel, and that's where, at least in the front, they're putting their sanitation.
right. So I'm just, again,
Vehicles.
I think we just need a little clarity on what that nature walk is gonna be. In relation to your transit routes, the legend's a little unclear, and I don't remember anything from the narrative that clears this up for me, but it references three things: a city bus route, a village transit bus end route, and a village transit WC route. So when you're referring to city bus route, I'd like to know, I mean, are we talking about buses coming up out of New York City? What line? When we're talking about village transit routes, are we talking about the KJ bus system? And I'd like to get some kind of understanding about the difference between, well, what is a bus end route? What is a WC route? That's just all unclear. I've got a number of questions in relation to the architecturals, but the only real comment that I think I have in relation to the DES is I'm assuming that the architecturals that were submitted is what the internal layout isn't just conceptual, but what it's really intended to be. In the hotel section, I thought I counted 75 rooms on the plans, but I seem to remember 30-something in the proposal being for the hotel. So that's just a little unclear to me. Are the plans quite not accurate? Is the narrative not line up? So just how many rooms will that be? I think that needs to be balanced both in the visuals and in the text. Everything else I have is in relation to site plan comments, and I'll hold off till an appropriate time for that. Thank you.
All right, you feel like you have direction?
Yes.
Okay,
Very much.
Thank you.
very much for your time, as always.
great, thanks.
Okay. Thank
Have a
you.
Good night. All right, next item on the agenda is 505 Forester Street. Forest Street. It says Forester on the agenda.
Evening, Joel Mann, on behalf of the applicant. So it got late, so it's a small job, so you can just vote on it and approve it and done, and everyone can go to sleep. So anyway, this is in the existing tax parcel, Section 1, Block 2, Lot 88, in the town of Monroe tax maps, 505 Forest Street. This is a small lot that's next to the, let's call it the Mikveh school property from the part of the Glenwood and Shadow Torah school system. Actually, Shadow Torah owns this property too. This is one of the last parcels on the street. The existing use of this property was as a single-family home. The intention of the use is to use it as part of the offices for the school. So technically, this is in the LI zoning district. So current use is a non-conforming use, and the proposed use will be a conforming use, but non-conforming with the setbacks. And actually now it's non-conforming use, non-conforming set, everything is non-conforming. So we will bring it to a much more conformance as it was the current use of the property. So technically, it's a small property, it's a small house. There is no, so potentially there might be something that the school wants to use more out of it than just the existing small area that we have now, but currently there's no plans. And so for now, they still want to use the existing and do as less and as much, as less possible investment or something in it. So because potentially this house will go down, will be, I don't know now. So the question is, what is the fastest way and the easiest way? Because we might need it even to go to ZBA, or since it's existing setbacks, maybe we can void ZBA. What is the fastest and easiest path to go through and get this approved to use for office use as part of the school system? As part of the submittal, I've submitted a bulk table to show the required, the existing, and the proposed. So basically, there's no change besides this property has no parking. Even though we believe that there is no need for parking because all the employees are part of the bus system, they're coming with the school, but I've proposed the parking just also for another reason, to avoid another variance needed, to create actually a new variance needed for this property. But if best interest will be maybe to remove the parking spaces.
Well, so I have a question. So there's a house there now,
Yes,
and you're proposing to use the house
yes,
as an office?
correct.
Okay, so it's not going to be for educational purposes, it's for an office building?
For
That's associated specifically with that
the
use?
school employees will have office there, like some.
So, are you proposing to merge the lots?
Not yet.
I'm just trying to think in terms of what might help if there's reduction of variances, might be to merge them, but
Problem is that
Lose
this is
one variance.
different boards. It's I think it's different deeds, and so it might be a problem to merge it.
why is there a problem to merge it?
There is actually different board ownership. So it's the same school system, but they're different boards, entities.
Oh, so the one that's immediately next to it, to merge it?
You can only merge it when everything is in the same entity.
Got it.
That's one thing. The second thing is, since we have, so going forward, if we plan to do something, might be willing to merge it, but since we're not planning anything yet, we want to do the minimum as possible since we have no plans yet. That's the concept. It might be the best option in the future will be to merge it, but we're not at that point now to know what we want to get out for the best benefit of the school from this property.
So you're in front of us because Ben said you need a site
I
plan?
need to go site plan approval because it's in the LI district. Anything in the LI, I need to go to site plan approval.
Sean, Ashley, you have any comments?
Sure. So first, as Joel noted, there's a bunch of area variances that are going to be required. So this will require referral to the ZBA. The next big thing I had was with regards to the parking. In my opinion, the parking just doesn't work because all spots are going to be required to back out onto Forest Road.
Yep.
So one alternative that I'll propose to you, Joel, the ZBA can grant a variance for you to share parking with the yeshiva building, since it looks like, based on the aerials, the parking spots are very close to this building. So perhaps while you're at the ZBA,
it's empty.
Right. While you're at the ZBA, maybe you could ask them for that variance.
It's section 5751G. It talks about parking on an adjacent parcel.
Parking on adjacent parcel, okay.
Next, regards to the property that's located within the right-of-way for, is that Old Forest Road?
That's where I believe I didn't have a chance to figure out if this comes from the surveyor. I couldn't contact him now to see if this is, I believe that's a proposed right-of-way line from the 25 feet from the center line of the road.
Right, so my suggestion would be that the applicant offer that for dedication to the town, so that the town owns that portion of the property below the street.
So, quick question, is that Old Forest, is that a town road? Or is that a private road?
Town till the cul-de-sac. But we can check on that.
Yeah, because it shows it as forest. Yeah, but I don't know if that's the case.
I can get clear.
Okay.
So the EAF that was submitted was not prepared on the DEC website, so if you could have that updated. Surprising.
Yeah.
And then it will have to go to county planning because it's within 500 feet of 17, and then we should discuss seeker with Ashley. Oh, and I'm sorry, I missed the tree preservation law. Depending on the parking and the extent of the improvements, if there's any clearing proposed, you'll have to prepare the tree plan.
So the only additional things I have are seeker. It would be, I believe, a type 2 as reuse of a residential or commercial structure. That's a permitted use. If
Under
office could
4,000
be-
square feet building footprint?
1,100.
Okay, so that would probably fit non-residential facility less than 4,000 square feet
Yeah, that
for the
would,
type 2? Okay,
either one.
so you may
No,
be-
actually, it wouldn't fit that one because they need variances, that's right. But it would fit, I think, for reuse of a residential or commercial structure that's permitted under the zoning,
Quick question,
if
If-
office is.
if it's 4,000 square feet, if it fits that threshold, but then it says something to effect of, and provided it meets other controls, so if it needs a variance, it no longer is a type 2?
Unless it fits under category.
Okay. Okay,
There are some categories for certain variances.
okay.
Yeah, as far as the variances and if they're going to be changing the parking, that additional provision we discussed. A public hearing would be discretionary because it's just for site plan, not special permit.
Nope.
So what's been submitted is really a survey back from 2016. So at some point, we'll actually need an updated site plan.
Right, I added a sketch plan because I didn't have the direction where to go. So the
Right.
question is, from here, do we need a referral from the planning board to go to the ZBA, or we can go directly through the building department? I didn't get a denial letter from Ben yet, but
So I think Ashley knows, but I don't think you need a referral from either. I think you can go directly to the ZBA.
And because it's showing elements on a site plan that aren't in compliance with your zoning, I think you've done in the past, you have referred an applicant, so you certainly can.
But I'd suggest that updated survey to make sure that your variances are correct.
there shouldn't be no change there, but we'll have that updated.
How you're going to do the parking, if you're going to be seeking it in the adjacent or in the alternative, some kind of parking on the site, there's that restriction against parking in the front yard as well. So if you could add the front yard setback line, delineate that on the plan, because then it'll be clear.
So the question is, maybe I should move forward a little bit further with the planning board to know exactly what I need from the ZBA.
I think you do. I mean, I think you have to show, all the bulk requirements, whether you meet them.
So Bonnie,
because
there is a plan that was submitted.
There's a
that
site
has
plan
the
too.
bulk table.
Oh, so when I downloaded, I have this one, which was the full submission, which I opened, and then your comments. And my full submission, unless I just
Maybe it's
breeze past it.
in the full submission, maybe scroll down.
Yeah, it was in there?
No, there's another,
Me
oh,
too.
this one. Okay.
Sorry.
So this has the bulk table, existing, the required, existing, and proposed. So the only change in proposed is lot coverage that's still in compliance. So everything that's not in compliance is pre-existing.
Who owns that property that's showing up as Owen Winter? Do you own that now?
No, that's being part of the property across the street.
This is what I meant.
This probably got cut over when they built Forest
Yeah.
Avenue. So if I remember correctly, this is part of the property across the street on the other side of Forest Avenue.
Okay. But again, these will be updated, all the ownerships, everything,
Yes.
because I don't think the
I
ownership
see
is.
that I also couldn't find any documents. I see the parking for this house is on Winter's property. So I'm not sure, I couldn't find any easement documents, but I will look it up again.
And I think that parking definitely doesn't work,
Right, that's-
because it's angle parking, and.
Are you talking my proposed parking? Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, to I think Sean's point, you're going to be backing up, and there's no
Right.
turnaround, what if you come, there's no
I
space?
was thinking that since this is to a very low traffic road, it might be acceptable to you, but again. Okay.
Actually, but here's a but. Find out what the status of Old Forest Road is,
Right.
because I don't know. This is what you're showing as a survey, but maybe there is opportunity. I don't know.
Look
But I
it
think
up.
Sean's suggestion was a good one, to see whether you can share parking with the adjoiner.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have to put in this kind of parking that really is just not going to work.
Right. So actually, like that, there might be the I don't want to propose any parkings will show that we have enough parking on the neighborhood parcel.
Well, so then I think you'd put a note that variance being requested
Right.
and then you'd have to show that you have consent to do that. And we have to make sure that it doesn't affect their parking calculation, so.
Consent, and then should one of the lots be sold separately, there has to be some mechanism to void this site plan.
Right, so there has to be an agreement in place that even if it's sold, you get the rights to continue to use that
Right.
property, which I don't think that's going to happen, but that's usually the way it works. And then is this on, since it's an old home, is this on well and septic, or is this on water and sewer, central water and sewer?
This is on well and septic.
Your note 5 says it's on central sewer.
Oh, maybe maybe one of the projects connect to central sewer. I couldn't verify that 100%. There is a sewer main into the neighborhood lot, and on the county's website it says that it's hooked up to central sewer, but I couldn't verify that. So that information was taken by county, but I need to verify that.
Yeah, so this is the tax map ID property data, and it's showing sewer district 60, county 1, bond, and there's no units assigned to it. So I don't know if that means that they're not on.
If there's no units assigned, then it's probably not connected.
Right, so you're probably still on septic.
I saw it on the report, but anyway, so then probably there's a septic.
So then you'll have to evaluate the proposed use versus existing.
Definitely less than,
Right.
so.
But or you could still connect, because I suspect there's a sewer somewhere around there. But if you're
Says
using the
I don't
septic.
want to connect. I don't want to invest that much in that property, since this is definitely not a long-term use. It's not worth it.
Donate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't get a sense that you're I suspect you have a well. So usually we want to see the well, the septics, I guess setback distances, everything that are required from an engineering perspective. So it seems, Joel, you need more homework on this one?
So then what I will do is I will advance the site plan with the survey work, come back to the planning board, let's get a site plan that's more a satisfactional condition, and then I will move to the ZBA and request the variances needed based on the route that we are going.
Just keep in mind, if you're going to be on the adjacent lot, you're going to need an accessible route to get into the building.
Okay.
Handicap access, yeah.
I'm going to put setback lines, just to compare them. So I know you have the bulk requirements provided, but were you going to actually outline the setback lines in the lot? So in other words,
I should create the
yeah,
box,
because
yep.
in other words, you know, are there 2 front yards? Are there 3 front yards? You know, just so we make sure we're looking at the right yard requirements.
There's actually 2 front yards because the rear is also a front yard.
So you have Old Forest, and then Owen Winter wouldn't be one, but then
On
you have
Winter,
then
that's
you
a
have
side
Forest.
yard.
So it's like 2 fronts.
And 2
well,
sides.
Yeah, you'll have to look
One
at
rear. Pick a rear.
and I think you pick a rear, whatever
Pick a
the
rear, and
regs
then
are,
one-
yeah.
And then the opposite is a side.
Front and the rear are the same setback, so it's 40. Both are 40.
Oh, true.
So
Yeah, but you'll need a third that's 40.
why?
Because if you have 2 fronts, you get to pick a side for the rear.
One of them is your
Actually,
rear, and then
it's
one of
the-
them is side.
Yeah, but here we have the fronts are abutting one each other. It's not like a corner lot.
You'll need the rear.
So one of the 2 sides need to become a rear?
Yeah.
Well, take a look, because we have a definition of corner
There is a
lot,
definition, and
But this is kind
Not
of
a
like
corner.
a through lot, yeah.
It's
So
a through
See
lot.
what you find, see what you find.
yeah. I mean, I think there's
Maybe
a
you have
separate
2 fronts
definition.
and 2 sides, I don't know, just take a look.
Okay.
It's an odd-shaped lot. Well, you might need to ask the ZBA what the requirement is for your yards if we don't know.
Where a lot extends through from street to street, the applicable front yard applies to both frontages.
It doesn't say side and rear.
It's somewhere, not in that section.
All right. Or it may not,
But typically you do need 1 rear and then,
and 1 side, yeah, like with the corner. Although, you know, with through lots, it really is 2 side yards. Because with a through lot, the 1 yard is typically your front, and then the other one becomes your rear. But you have to treat it like a front yard.
Right, so that's what I'm
So-
thinking. A corner lot, you need to choose a rear, but a true lot, you probably, one is rear, one is front, but you need to
So-
treat both as fronts if,
But when you go to the ZBA, help us with that interpretation, so
Getting
we know how to deal with
interpretation
it
of
in the
that, too.
future, if it's not in there.
okay. But we need to look, maybe we'll
so
find.
Oh, we
through
have it.
lot, a definition that on a through lot, the owner may designate the front lot line, and then the line opposite the designated front lot line is the rear.
Oh, there you go.
Very clear,
So
okay.
sides, a front and a rear.
Interpret it.
See, that's good zoning. We thought of
It
it.
is.
It was probably there. All right,
Okay.
we'll be back.
Back, I'm not sure if we'll be in for next month, but if not, we'll
Okay.
skip a month, we'll be the next one.
Okay,
There's some homework to do.
all right,
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
all right. I think we want to discuss a potential special meeting. So this would involve having a special meeting specifically for the Summercrest application. and that we would take up that application, and we would let the applicant know and their attorney know that we're going to have it. Since obviously we our application this evening because of the circumstances, but we would give another opportunity so we can also finish conducting whatever business we need to finish or to move forward. So with that in mind, how are people's schedules looking? So let's start with our consultants first because they're going to need to be here.
I have a free,
Next week?
next week, yeah.
So it looks like I have 22nd and 23rd.
Free or not free?
Free.
I have the 24th free.
Oh, yeah, the 24th? 4th.
24th, there's no other meeting, it looks like, at Town Hall either.
I mean, technically I have the 25th Friday. I
It's
know.
on a Friday.
I know, but I'm just throwing it out there. The following week,
There is also a fifth
yeah, I was going to be
Tuesday,
on,
Wednesday, Thursday the following week, so probably any of those would.
I was going to be on vacation, but I can do the 31st. I mean, I'm around. I'm doing a staycation again, so if it's important for me to come in, I can. 30th, I have a little meeting also. So I could do the 29th or the 31st. Anybody? How are you guys? First, Ashley and Sean. How's the 29th or the 31st?
I was hoping to go to AOT.
Huh?
I was hoping to go to Association of Towns on the 29th, but I can come here if needed. 30th is good.
So the
31st?
29th or the 31st is okay?
31st is fine.
Either are okay with.
Yeah.
Okay, so how's everybody for 29th or 31st? Yes?
Second.
What is your schedule like for the 29th or the 31st? 31st is open? Yes?
I think I can do the.
Nick?
Same boat, but
So I can't, 29th is the only day, Wednesday, the 30th. 22nd is.
Okay, yeah, we're talking about the 29th and the 31st now. Thanks, George.
I can only do the 29th. Realistically, I can ask about the 31st if you guys decide.
So who can't make the 29th? You can't make the 29th. You can make the 29th? 29th?
yeah, I think that's better for me.
I can make the 29th.
Lou, you can't make the 29th? You can make the 29th. 29th? So I think that we can do the 29th. If we're really trying to get this in, because we have to get this in.
Schedule a special meeting for August 29th at 6 PM? Do you want to do 5 PM? No.
I'll second that.
We could do 5 if people, I don't know what time people get back from work.
I can't do until 6.
Okay, so we'll say 6 PM. This is the only thing on the agenda, so.
I'll second, yeah.
Napoli,
Aye.
Aye.
Bonnie France,
Aye.
Bob Garzak,
Aye.
Dylan Penn.
Aye.
Gonna go back over that, Nick Napoli,
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Bonnie Franson.
Aye.
Thank you.
I'll work with Doreen to get the notice it's posted for the meeting, and I'll also reach out to the applicant's attorney to let them know as well.
Okay. And then we'll coordinate further on this. All right. Do people want to do the minutes? You want to hold off?
Well, no, but we did bail out on them last time, too. Just,
We could do this at the special meeting.
we're not going to do them at the special meeting. Let's not get ourselves.
I'll be honest, you guys don't have to hang around, so they don't, it doesn't matter to them, but we could do the minutes. Then we just, because it's already 9 now, we've been here 3
Yeah,
hours.
that's fine. I'm just.
Are we okay to do minutes at the special meeting if possible? At least some of them? Yes? Oh, you're not gonna be here.
Sure.
Thank you.
Works for me.
All right,
Stipulate considering it. How's that?
okay, but we'll consider them.
All right.
And I still need the 18th minutes, so let's try and get that done. And I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions, any nays? Motion carries, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.